As a 25-year-old, I remember feeling invincible, like the world was at my feet and I had an ocean of possibilities at my fingertips. I had overcome so many things and I had grown to feel like I could fully love and embrace all that was me. Being a student and tutor at the Art Academy in Berlin, I felt like I was exactly where I needed to be and I had the rest of my life ahead of me. I was discovering feminist art history and the art of spoken word, and I was delving into the versatile communities and underworlds of Sin City. I had finally gotten my hunting license, and the thrill of interchanging sceneries from Norwegian and German wildlife and Berlin nightlife was electrifying. Alongside art school, I immersed myself in new experiences, and especially all sorts of mischievous performance art, clubbing, psychedelics, and various forms of sexual exploration. I felt like I was bathing in the juices of life, and I had fallen in love with queer culture, sex positivity, and celebratory hedonism. I know it's not for everyone, but for me it felt like coming home. I realized I belong in the colorful and wicked outskirts of this world. That year I traveled to the States to visit friends and dear ones. We road tripped from San Francisco to Los Angeles to Tijuana in Mexico. I spent a week visiting art spaces and museums in New York, going to burlesque shows and taking myself out to eat oysters in the grandiose underground bar of Grand Central Station. I was determined to live and love fully, with all of my mind, body and heart. I was feeling all of the feelings and doing all of the things, always hungry for more and unafraid of stumbling along the way. I traveled with the small cutout of a nude self-portrait printed on transparent foil that I kept under the cover of my phone. I would take it out and place my naked body on top of cityscapes, seas and mountains. Is the art space a temporary utopia? Can the artist and the self-portrait really be separated? Where does the process end and the artwork begin? Can I be my own muse? I returned to Europe with the mononucleosis infection, and my health hasn't been the same since. I've only gotten worse with time, and finally, 4 years later, I was formally diagnosed with myalgic encephalomyelitis, also known as chronic fatigue syndrome or ME/CFS. The prognosis is pretty disheartening. ME/CFS is a neuroimmune disease that impairs multiple systems in the body. They say it's usually a lifelong debilitating illness. There's no known cure or treatment yet. Most of us are significantly disabled and unable to work. ME/CFS has been globally under-researched and medically neglected for too long. I'm losing my health, memory, balance, strength, endurance, spirit and independence. I don't remember the last day I didn't feel sick. I'm in a constant energy deficit and I'm never not in pain. I'm never not in pain. I'm never not in pain. I now spend most of my time on bed rest, away from everyone and everything I love. They say not to let your illness define you. They say not to let your disabilities hold you back. But whoever said that never experienced what I'm going through. I barely recognize myself anymore. In my dreams, there's this lurking notion that I'm no longer able to do all the things I'm dreaming of. My fantasy realm is slowly becoming more and more pragmatic. I'm starting to forget what it feels like to live life in all its colors. I'm no longer able to imagine what it feels like to not be sick. The thing about having a neglected and complex chronic illness with no verified cure and no clinically approved treatments is that we're practically left alone and socially shunned, stuck in limbo, hoping for some kind of a vitality refund. It's shocking to receive a severe, life-altering diagnosis and then be told there's near to nothing to be done about it. There's no flowers, no balloons, and for most of us no hospital team or clinic ready to care for us, no treatment plan. Since I started getting ill, I've had more doctors tell me I was fine, or it's all in my head, than I can count on my 2 hands. And when I seek better care, I continue to be disproportionately questioned, disbelieved, and sent away to manage on my own. Studies have shown that people with ME/CFS have a significantly decreased quality of life and increased risk of earlier mortality, often from suicide or cardiovascular complications. Most of us live a long life in the shadows. In a few years, I've gone from living a vigorous, passionate, and daring life, mostly outside of my home, to barely leaving my house anymore. It feels like my whole life has been put on hold. I have so much more I want to be and do and feel and go through. Instead, I'm captive in a sick body waiting for a medical breakthrough. The more I learn about chronic illness and ME/CFS, the more I learn about women's health. My condition affects 3 times more women than men. Conditions that are primarily affecting women are statistically more often misunderstood, misdiagnosed, and mistreated. Historically, women like me have been dismissed as suffering from hysteria or even accused of being entangled with black magic. The mistreatment and disbelief of chronically ill women today is a regrettable nod to the history of witch hunts and ostracization of disabled women and other marginalized groups. In the absence of sufficient medical knowledge, unfamiliar health conditions were often deemed vicious, dark, and obscure some 100 years ago. Any social disparity could be grounds for an accusation of witchery. Writer Tish Thor proclaims beautifully that we are the grandchildren of the witches they didn't burn. My sick body belongs to a lineage of illness, strength, and resistance. Women diagnosed with hysteria in the late 19th and throughout the 20th century had a lot in common with these proclaimed witches. Hysteria was basically the medical explanation for everything that men found mysterious or unmanageable in women, a conclusion only supported by men's historic and continuing dominance over medicine. Although many so-called hysterical women were perfectly healthy by today's standards, some were, like myself, suffering from illnesses that are yet to be fully understood and acknowledged in medicine. During the HIV/AIDS epidemic in the 80s and 90s, people in the queer community had to fight to survive medical ostracism fueled by homophobia and hatred. They too were pushed into the shadows and denied sufficient care and treatment for far too long, and too many were lost due to stigmatization and negligence. With time, society and science evolved, and what used to be considered an acute death sentence has in most cases become another manageable chronic illness. However, the horrifying mistreatment of the victims of the HIV/AIDS epidemic only adds to the unjust recurrence of medical neglect in marginalized groups in society today. What people like me, the witches of the past, and my queer ancestors all have in common is that we've been pulled away from the magic that defines our very existence. The weight of misogyny, dogmatism, and bigotry has held us down for centuries. How I wish I could ward off these evils. Since I graduated from the art academy, I've had these recurring dreams from the time back when I was 17 and dropping out of high school. A cocktail of mental illness, chronic pain, political hyperrealism, and teenage alcoholism as self-medication, sprinkled with antidepressants and therapists telling me to simply stop feeling so much, made me unfit for the system. It's an old feeling, dropping out. In my dreams, I'm skipping school with a big knot in my chest, and I wake up feeling like I fucked things up for myself, struggling to believe I was capable of achieving a higher education after all. Now I sometimes feel like I'm just as hopeless as my 17-year-old self. I can see her struggle, but I separate her from her circumstances, as if she's a singular issue in a perfect world, an unfit piece of the puzzle. How dare I be tired and needing rest? How dare I be sick? How dare I want more from this life? The concept of progress radically shifts when you're chronically ill. My story is not about progression and success. In a way, chronic illness is inherently system-defiant and a rebellious act on its own. At least I'm fucking with the perception of production-based value. I still have this inherent and insatiable hunger for more in life, and as I'm becoming increasingly isolated from everything I've ever known, I'm struggling to let go of what I thought the rest of my life would be like. I yearn for the chaos of everyday life, and I grieve the loss of self. When I receive well-meaning messages to get well soon, I condemn the society that failed to teach us how to care for the chronically ill and disabled. Life's unfair, anyone can get sick, nobody deserves this. Chronic illness and disability is and has always been a part of the human experience. We often avoid recognizing other people's suffering because it requires us to face our own vulnerability. I never imagined myself becoming sick like this. When acknowledging the arbitrary nature of most illnesses, we can no longer escape the lack of control we have over our own fate. No one knows what the future holds. Our lives can be so incredibly fragile. This world can be so harsh, cruel, and painful, although strangely and simultaneously full of love, beauty, and mystery too. Life is precious, love is infinite. My story isn't over yet.